Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdsson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. Now, big news with House Resolution 193. Congressman Mike Rogers has proposed a bill that would mean pulling out of the United Nations. Now, it's called the American Sovereignty Restoration Act of 2017. Now, I want to clarify quickly that this bill has been put in front of every new Congress for the last 20 years. Ron Paul, most famously from 1997 until about 2011, put it forward several times, but it doesn't change the fact that this is extremely important, and people have to get behind it and understand what it means, because it is shrinking the size of government, and that's what we talk about so much. And even more so than that, John, we have the globalist order, which has been implementing so many branches off the United Nations that push their rule over the American people. And I would have to say that it's pretty much illegal what the United Nations has been doing. They have been pushing Americans and people around the world into servitude, and this is a good thing. So we'll go right into what this bill means. And I just want to point out that the United Nations has so many branches, and it affects us in every single way. We did a video not that long ago breaking down the many tentacles of globalism, as the video is called, and how the United Nations has all these branches, and all those branches have sub-branches that reach out into every little crevice in the United States society and throughout the entire world. So let's go into it. We have the first page here of this bill. John, can you go into what they're talking about?
Yeah, 100%. This bill is what's going to bring sovereignty back to the United States if it gets implemented. It takes to see if that's going to happen. Now, let's go right into what they want to accomplish with this bill.
Yeah.
The bill wants to repeal of the United Nations Participation Act of 1945, which basically means pulling out.
Mm-hmm.
It wants the repeal of the United Nations Headquarters Agreement Act, which basically means that they want to have the United Nations pull any offices out of the United States to get fully rid of the corrupt organization.
Yeah, the coercion by international government. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's number 4, United States assessed and voluntary contribution to the United Nations, and you got to continue on your page, which basically means that they want to withdraw funding to the United Nations.
Yeah, as they mentioned, no funds are authorized to be appropriated or otherwise made available for assessed or voluntary contributions of the United States to the United Nations or to any organ, specialized agency, commission, or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations, except that funds may be appropriated to facilitate termination of United States membership and withdrawal of United States personnel and equipment in accordance with Section 2 and 3, respectively. Upon termination of the United States membership, no payment shall be made to the United Nations or to any organ, specialized agency, commission, or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations out of any funds appropriated prior to such termination or out of any other funds available for such purposes. So there's a lot of bureaucratic...
it's just ridiculous that they have to write all of that, because that just shows us how terrible it is already.
And of course, a lot of congressmen are getting this on their desk and they're going, what? No, this is... Because, let's face it, on both sides, left and right, Republican and Democrat, it's kind of a mixed bunch these days, and both sides are basically globalists. They're overwhelmed with globalists, I should say, except for some few, including people like Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Justin Amash, and Mike Rogers apparently. But we'll go into it further. Section 5 talks about United Nations peacekeeping operations, where they're talking about terminating that function as well, which is a great thing, because we've seen how many wars have come about since the inception of the United Nations and through the League of Nations as well, and a lot of illegal wars, a lot of deadly wars, and we're talking about the death and destruction of so many, the manipulation of people, the fear-mongering, the creating the enemy and then going after the enemy and then banking on it. It's all that kind of stuff, and they say no funds are authorized to be appropriated or otherwise made available for any United States contribution to any United Nations military or peacekeeping operation or force. And then they go on that no funds may be obligated or expended to support the participation of any member of the armed forces of the United States as part of the United Nations military or peacekeeping operation or force. No member of the armed forces of the United States may serve under the command of the United Nations. So we don't have an international army under this bill, which is a great thing, because Of course, we've talked about as well the EU, the European
super
Union.
army, yeah.
They want to create a super army. Germany's trying to rush that, and they want to aggress against Russia. I thought the United Nations and the EU were about peace on Earth, but really what I feel like they really are about is divide, conquer, death and destruction, cause a world war, and that's exactly what things like that would cause.
Their problem, reaction, solution. The Hegelian Dialectic, Josh, they implemented all these different organizations. You know how they first fund these countries that are on the verge of bankruptcy, and then of course they can't pay, and they end up in civil unrest in the country, and then they take advantage of that civil unrest, put their forces in there, and then they suck the money out. Like they got multiple straws sucking it out of these countries.
There's a reason why I say the many tentacles of globalism, and they destroy countries, kill men, women, and children, kill entire families, leave it with craters, overthrow their bad dictators and put in even worse dictators under the guise of peacekeeping, and they basically destroy any possibility of peace on Earth by doing just that. And what they do is they fund and arm the terrorist rebels and everything. We've seen that through the United Nations, through the EU, through Britain, through the United States and Canada. They fund these armies, they fund these rebels, and then they turn into the new enemy, and then they go after that because they need a boogeyman to go after. And while a lot of these boogeymen are real, and there is a reason to be afraid of them, and there is a reason to worry about it, it's because they created in the first place, and then they get us on our knees begging for them to help us, when really personal responsibility makes up for all of this and voluntary interactions.
Well, looking at this before you go on, peace is the new war. That's what it seems like to all of these guys.
Absolutely. And then we go on to Section 6, which is withdrawal of United Nations presence in facilities of the government of the United States and repeal of diplomatic immunity. So it's they're talking about withdrawal from United States government property. The United Nations, including any organ, specialized agency, commission, or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations, may not occupy or use any property or facility of the United States government. And then they go on diplomatic immunity, which is Section B of Section 6. They go on to say no officer or employee of the United Nations, including any organ, specialized agency, commission, or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations, or any representative, officer, or employee of any mission to the United Nations of any foreign government shall be entitled to enjoy the privileges and immunities of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of April 18th, 1961, nor may any such privileges and immunities be extended to any such individual. The privileges, exemptions, and immunities provided for in the International Organizations Immunity Act of December 29, 1945, or in any agreement or treaty to which the United States is a party, including the agreement entitled Agreement between the United Nations and United States of America regarding headquarters of the United Nations, which was signed in 1947.
This is a warning to the people that want to be like the Morris Strongs and the Grohl and Brundtlens of, how they've been corrupt around the world. Like, we know what Morris Strong's been involved in. That just basically says, like, if this happened, he would not be able to have the immunity anymore, and he would have ended up in prison. But of course he's dead now, so he was able to get away from that.
And this is, I love this part, Section 7. This would be such a beautiful thing if it passed. It probably won't, but we need to get the talk about it up there. We need to be loud about it. But Section 7 says, repeal of United States membership and participation in the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organizations. And speaking of cultural, we're talking about cultural Marxism. We're talking about state-sponsored education, which is just brainwashing children. We're talking about this faulty science pushed by globalists in order to push new taxes, new regulations at a global scale, and push people further into servitude. Things that don't help the problem, they just carry it on. Like John said, the Hegelian Dialectic, a problem, reaction, solution, repeat. And they mention the joint resolution entitled A Joint Resolution Providing for Membership and Participation by the United States in the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and authorizing an appropriation thereof, approved July 30th, 1946. And you made a note here, John. I believe that's about the OECD.
Yeah, that is the OECD, of course. And that's what they're doing. They're like, you got to remember, the United Nations has all these organizations in place. They're ready to have their global government.
Oh, totally.
They have all the different arms of the government in place. They're just waiting for the go to get in place and set up this global one world government. And that's why, people are panicking now at the World Economic Forum and other globalist places. They're saying, we're losing. We got to, really do something here.
As Hillary Clinton mentioned a few years ago, there's an info war and we're losing. And we are the ones that are winning as long as we persist and be consistent and don't fall for false idols, which is something that people too often do.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, they want to feel good. They want to feel like they won, but the fight isn't over.
That's
so
when
they just
it
sit
starts.
down. Yeah, that's exactly. And people sit down, become apathetic, and then they get taken over and enslaved slowly and painfully. And it's going to happen again and again and again. Democrat, Republican, repeat over and over and over again. Yeah. Now, going forward, there's Section 8. Now, repeal of United Nations Environment Program Participation Act of 1973. So we're talking Agenda 21, 2030 stuff here. We're talking about this global governing body trying to create the sustainable development situation, which they want to depopulate people. They don't want us to be here talking. They want as few of us as possible so that we are easier to control. And then they want to implement carbon taxes across the board in order to, it doesn't even actually stop carbon emissions, which are the plant of life, or the gas of life. They create plant life, they create fauna, but they are using this in order to be a huge cash grab, destroy small businesses, further monopolize major industries that are subsidized and favored by the state. And this just continues on and on and on. And we see these disgusting individuals like Maurice Strong, like you mentioned, that were pushing this for so many years. This would be a great thing. And they mentioned the United Nations Environment Program Participation Act in 1973 is repealed. This would be a beautiful thing because this isn't about environmentalism. True environmentalists try to do something to lower pollution, but this isn't even about truly pollution. This is about the air we breathe and the money that we have in our wallet and draining that, so rural communities, people in poverty, and small businesses suffer the most. That puts us further into servitude.
I would call it Marx-ventalism.
Absolutely.
In honor of great Karl Marx, sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, the great Karl. Now, we go on to Section 9, which is repeal of United States participation in the World Health Organization. These are the guys pushing vaccines. These are the guys pushing these major pharmaceuticals that actually hurt the so-called free healthcare. The free healthcare system creates problem reaction solution again, and they monopolize big pharma companies that aren't looking for a cure, aren't looking to help us, but they simply want to make a bunch of profit, monopolize so no one can compete and no one can innovate and no one can actually come up with great new ways to solve the problems of disease and hunger and so on.
And for example, Codex Alimentarius, which bases on how much of this and that you can get into the supplements and so on as well. So it'd be fantastic. It's like pulling out of that and actually being able to I just laugh at how they say, oh, you should have X amount of vitamin C a day. Well, I take about 1,600 to 2,000% more than that, and I feel great.
There's a reason why organic food costs so much more. And I mean, this would be a great time to bring in Sui Bono, who benefits. And I mean, you follow that money and you will see who benefits, and it's not us, folks. So moving on, we have Section 10, repeal of involvement in United Nations conventions and agreements. John, want to go into a bit of what this means?
Well, all these agreements that are out there is basically trade deals and so on. You see like the TPP and all these deals that are out there. These are created, in the womb of the United Nations.
Yeah, and they want to stop monopolies, but then they create monopolies. They cater to more liberalism and say, well, don't you hate these massive corporations? And then these liberals are like, yeah, I hate massive corporations. Well, you need this then. Well, but actually what it does is it creates those monopolies, puts those big corporations up on a pedestal, and again, it hurts the small businesses.
These agreements are too, you got to remember, they are to create that global government by, creating more and more of those multilateral agreements. Now you're setting the framework for that massive global government and control.
And this would be a good time to mention the IMF. Now, if we're talking about pulling out of the United Nations, that means pulling out of the IMF. And just go into quickly what the IMF does and how they are basically trying to enslave people in monetary madness.
Yeah, well, the International Monetary Fund, what they do is they have actually their own currency, which is the special drawing rights, which is based on a basket of currencies. Which
world currency.
Yeah, a world currency that they want to implement on a multilateral trade deals. And they don't want, the people like us using it. They want, the big multilateral corporations and, of course, the countries to use it. But then for the peasants on the floor, like, we would just use then devalued currencies to that special drawing rights. That is their ultimate goal. It's not just a friendly organization that lend money to people that are struggling. These guys are vicious loan sharks that borrows money out to dictators and people that they know that's going to waste that money, so they could come in and suck out all of the commodities, all of their government-owned transportation, infrastructure, and so on. That's all they were about.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, what the SDR is all about, I mean, they're trying to bring in a cashless society into that basket. They want to push this notion.
With the blockchain system, they want to, implement that.
Centrally planned blockchain.
It would be a centrally planned. Like, let me just, because I know some people confuse, the blockchain technology and Bitcoin and so on with not being centrally planned. Well, you can even centrally plan Bitcoin by taking enough processing power and putting it into a central cloud somewhere, a big server center where they have all of these servers, and then you have full control over it. So you can even centrally control that. But that's their plan. It's not to have a peer-to-peer system, which is, the BitTorrent system that we currently have today. It's to have the central plan where they have all the processing power at one location.
Absolutely. And what a cashless society inevitably means is that we would be technically enslaved to the banks, because these transactions, if centrally planned, go through the banking system. We don't have cash. Our money's always in a bank. Every transaction goes through a bank, and that means that we're enslaved to the banks because, well, if our money's in the bank, it's not ours. It's a bank's. And if all of our money is always through the bank, then it's never ours. And then they can take that, and they have bail-in measures where they can just rob you of all your money from your account. And this is so important because what it means is, I know a lot of people on the left are talking about they want a cashless society. Oh, wouldn't that be great? It just sounds good, right? Because, money is the root of all evil and blah, 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 blah.
But it would be easy, yes. But you got to think very, very deeply about all of the things surrounding it and your privacy and everything that's going to be taken away from you.
Physical value people, non-centrally planned, free monetary systems. That's what we need. And now moving on, we have Section 11, Reemployment with United States government after service with an international organization. And they go on to say, nothing in this act shall be construed to affect the rights of employees under subchapter 4 of chapter 35 of Title 5 United States Code relating to reemployment after service with an international organization. And then they go on for their notification in Section 12. Effective on the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary of State shall notify the United Nations and any organ, specialized agency, commission, or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations of the provisions of this act. And they set effective date for Section 13, except as otherwise provided. This act and the amendments made by this act shall take effect on the date that is 2 years after the date of the enactment of this act. So it gives some leeway because they're worried that people are going to fear that they're going to pull the rug out from underneath them.
Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I think it's really important to mention that this was pushed by Ron Paul initially. It is kind of a libertarian ideal that it's not just even about sovereignty, it's about individualism. And, you have to deconstruct from the top down.
It's a deconstruction of the government.
Absolutely. And, if we implemented something like this, that would mean that we would be able to be free of a world government, something that we've been talking about so long, something that George H.W. Bush famously talked about all the time, a new world order. And I think Donald Trump is the only person so far that hasn't pushed a so-called new world order. He even talked about pulling out of the United Nations. But with that said, we have to be very hesitant about what we follow, because just because he says that doesn't mean that he's not growing the size of the military-industrial complex, which he is, and that is a global order, and that needs to be stopped because what it's doing
and
is
the security-industrial complex as well.
Absolutely, and the spying, the nanny state, the spying state, the Orwellian kind of futures that a lot of us are worried about on the left and the right. I think this really is an important bill to be put forward, but of course, we need the individual's help to push it forward and get it enough attention so that it could actually happen. I mean, there's a lot of articles out there by, Yahoo and Jezebel and stuff like that where they're talking about, well, this could mean that we're going to pull out, and Salon.com is freaking out, and,
I just love that.
Yeah, and Snopes, I always like it when they cry like little babies, because that's what they are. But we look at things like Salon, and they're like, oh, this is just total insanity. It's so wrong. It's craziness. You know what? This is how we get our freedom back. We have to destruct from the top down, and we have to get rid of the chains that so many of us unfortunately revere. And this is the way to the future. This is a way to prosperity. This is a way to free markets. This is a way to individualism out of collectivism. It's a way to voluntary interactions between free individuals. It's a way to freedom, and it's a way for us to be able to make up our own minds and not be dictated upon by a bunch of unelected pieces of trash that are ruling our world with an iron fist like Stalinist Russia.
I think I'm actually going to steal from InfoWars and Alex Jones. Before America or any other country could be great again, it needs to be free again.
Absolutely, and that goes from all angles: monetary freedom, market freedom. And we got to talk about when it comes to a health system, which also borders on that regulatory freedom, free from the regulations that are pushing people down this bottomless pit to the extent that they currently are. It reaches all ends: health, water, food, shelter, gun rights. I mean, the United Nations is trying to regulate the internet in favor of George Soros' Open Society Foundation, which means anyone that dares say anything bad about any thing that the left or the right is doing really could be just trying to undermine the America, undermine the world order. Well, this is where that fake news thing comes from, where they claim that anyone that disagrees with them is fake news. It is a concerted push and effort by the globalists in order to censor our free will to the extent of absolute enslavement, and we've seen that in Canada as well with things like Bill C-16, which you can't even say he or she to people. You could go to jail with a charge with a hate crime. I mean, and all this stuff comes from this ideology that comes from the United Nations, and it is an evil, and it needs to be stopped.
Oh, it totally does. With the delivery of the ICANN over to the ITU, the International Telecom Union, what it did is basically gave them the power of the DNS, which is the domain name servers, which is basically what gives, like, World Alternative Media, for example's address, that is searchable. If they were to pull that out, you need to know our IP address. In order to actually find our content.
I mean, there's a way out, because it doesn't mean the entire internet. You could actually opt out by going with a .bit kind of address, but the problem with that is most don't. So if you have things on YouTube, well, I'm sorry, it's governed by this United Nations body.
Oh, it totally is, and how they can restrict it is by pulling the rug of saying that we're going to withdraw the domain names for the World Alternative Media and all this because they own them, because they gave them out. So now they could just steal it, and then basically people will be left with not finding us anymore, because what that does, it actually they're searching for this, and then they links us to the IP address.
Yeah,
so that's what they do. But yeah, it's like we need to stand up here and really do something, because if we're not persisting now, when you guys have the chance in the United States, if you don't do anything with this, if you just stay put and think that you have victory on your hands just because Trump got in, you're wrong. Like, you really need to focus right now, like you never ever have done before. This is a chance. This is a chance. This guy will listen. Yep. So do something and talk and spread the word to everybody that you can.
Yeah, do you want freedom, or do you want a censorship of any opposition and technological Hitlerian future that we could be entering into under the United Nations currently? And then when it comes to our health, our shelter, our defense, our sound money, I mean, they will probably like to confiscate, like the United States did under FDR, the currency that we need to thrive and ensure our wealth as well outside of the fiat system. And I mean, this is so important on so many angles. It affects every single individual and every single individual's every form of life, everywhere they go, everything they do. And we need to opt out of this system to the best of our ability, and we need that loud voice in order to do so. So what do you think the bottom line is, John?
Well, the bottom line is get out before it's too late.
Absolutely, and I feel like it's already too late, but I think we still do have a bit of an opportunity to pull out. So let's hope that people listen, and let's hope people do something about this, because I mean, I've been saying this for years. We don't have that much time. I mean, we are 160 plus years into this world order madness.
Government always collapses in on itself, and that's what it's going to do this time as well. So don't think you're going to try to change history. you're not.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, John. And we will be back at you with much more. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated. And of course, check our link in the description and the comments for Anarchapulco, where you can save 10% on your tickets to Anarchapulco by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM.
And hang out with Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Come and see me. So we'll see you soon. This is Josh Sigurdsson, John Snyson, signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.